Hello again, and welcome to Learn Python 3 the hard way, exercise 21. Now we're going to learn the concept of return. So return is basically a way for your functions to pass a value back to whoever called them. So this concept is a little difficult for people to get at first, but it's one of these things that if you just play around with it, it makes total sense. All right, so remember, we can do this, right? We can say x equals 10, right? Well, we could also say x equals open some file, right? Okay, so how does this function open, right? You've been making functions, so you know this is a function, right? How is this function open giving x something? Okay, well, how it does that is with return. So when you write a function, and you place the statement return, and then you can give it a value after the return, okay? When you do that, it stops the function right there, exits the function, jumps back to where the function was called, and gives that function to whoever called it, okay? So we've got some functions here, and I'm going to walk through how this will work so you can see it operating. So we've got add, it's going to add two numbers. Subtract is going to subtract two numbers. And notice I'm sort of doing your debug printing for you. I've got the print, and then multiply, and then divide. So let's start with line 21. I'm going to run this really quick so that you can see what this does. So let's see, Python ex21.py. All right. So here's that first function call. And actually, let me side by side this. And put you there. And I'm going to drop the size of this down on the left so you can read it. Okay, there we go. Now, I'm at line 21. And this over here is 30 and 5. So there's A right there. That line. Now, if we go to add, let's go to the beginning up there, right? Come up to here. That's where add is at, right? So what happens, right, is when I call add, I pass it 30 and 5. Then add runs. It prints out that you see on the left over on the PowerShell. I've highlighted it in yellow. It's printing out 30 and 5. And then it hits here. It adds 30 and 5 and returns it. So now the variable age right there has 35, which is 30 plus 5. We can see that if I do this. I'm going to do a debug print like I tell you you should do. All right, and let's rerun our thing. Let me give you some space so you can see it. There we go. See, I got my debug print showing me that it's now 35. Okay, so let's go to subtract. Same thing. Subtract is passing 78 and 4. So let's print it out. Let's run our little script with this new debug in it. Height is 74. 78 minus 4. If we go look at that function, subtract, oops, we see that's what it does. Okay, great. So multiply should do the same thing, right? So let's do this again. Let's do print. And notice I'm doing what I'm telling you to do. I'm going to say weight equals weight. Okay. Don't try to guess what reply should do, what multiply should do. Print it out. Find out what it's doing. All right. And there we see weight is 180, which is correct. 90 times that. So the return value is basically, if we look at weight again, we see multiply. Once it hits return, the function exits. So Python, to go through the whole thing, let's do the, back this up. Let's do the whole thing. So Python reaches this line. It sees the function multiply, right? or even sooner. It sees weight, it goes, okay, I don't know what weight is. Ah, there's an equals. Okay, so weight is going to be assigned something. Hold on. It's going to be assigned, okay, we're going to call multiply. I see parentheses and multiply and 2 arguments. Okay, so then it pops up to here. It pops up to the multiply function. It does this, calls the print, runs this multiply expression right there, and then does return. That exits the function, jumping back to here, and then Python takes that result. It's almost as if it replaces this code with the value of 90 times 2, which is 180. It's almost like it does this, 180, okay? And then assigns it to there. And then moves on to the next, which prints it out. And the same with divide. I won't bother printing that out because you can trust me that it does it. All right, so now here's the puzzle. Let me just full screen this so we can see the puzzle really well. And full screen that. Okay, and let's move this font up again. So we have kind of almost, like a math expression. So can you figure out this math expression? Can you write it out? So for example, I would write above it, this isn't correct. I'm just giving an example. I would say it's, age plus height times IQ plus weight. That's not the right answer. That's just an example of what you should be typing. So sit there and try to figure this out. And I'm going to show you a way to sort of figure it out on your own using the Python shell. So pause the video, see if you can figure it out. Okay, we're back. Now, did you figure it out? Did you get the same answer? So let's see what we can do to make this with the Python shell. So what I'm going to do, right, is we have these things. I'm just going to grab this, okay, like this. And I'm going to do Python. So we're going to run Python as a shell. Now, I don't really want this to run. I'm just going to take this and use it as paste. There we go. Just like that. Oh, I did the wrong one. Let me do this one more time. Okay. And then Control V. And it still does not copy it. Sometimes the copy paste just does not work in Atom at all. Copy. There we go. That's what we want. Okay, so that's going to do nothing because I did a comment character. All right. Now what we want is we want to figure this out. So one way we can do this, right, as we know, we can set age, subtract. Okay, we got height, multiply. So the first thing we have is this divide IQ is 2. So let's set IQ equal to something, to whatever we have IQ up here for. IQ is going to be 100 divided by 2, so that's going to be 50. Okay. Then we need weight. So let's figure out what weight is, and we have our debug statements above. So weight is 180. Okay, and then we have height. So we have our debug statement, and we know height is 74. Oops, height should be 74. Oh, to get that, I just use the up arrow, which usually works. Up and down arrow will repeat things you've done. Okay, and then I also need age. So age equals, we're at 35. 35. Oh, and it's also right here. Well, I could just use that. Anyways, it was more instructive for you to do it the other way. Now, I have to replicate the output that I have. And notice that it's showing me a log right here. Here's a puzzle. It divides, then it multiplies, then it subtracts, then it adds. Okay, so when Python calls this function here, right, it needs the argument. So it has age already. I've already assigned age. It needs subtract. Okay, so it has to jump and call subtract. So it goes to try to call subtract, and it has height, but it doesn't have multiply. So again, it has to call multiply because it doesn't really know what multiply is going to return yet. So then it has weight, but it doesn't have divide. It has to call divide. And then finally, it doesn't have IQ, so it calls divide. Or no, finally, it has IQ, and it has 2, so it calls divide. Okay? Now, going back into the code, we can see, popping down here, we're at this point. It's stopped to call add, subtract, then multiply, then divide. So we're hanging out in divide. Right here. That's where we're at. We call divide. We do return. Now we're back here. So the first thing we have to do is divide. So we can do that. IQ 2. Oh, wait. If I had the divide function there, I could do it. So we just do divide IQ equals 2. IQ 5 by 2. Okay, so that's 25, right? Now we have that first number. So what happens is our little function calls that we've got, right, can now be translated into this. I've got 25. And we have to match the parentheses. So weight, multiply, height, age. There we go. All right, so now we've basically removed the divide call. Now we're popping back and we're going to go to multiply. Okay, so we do multiply. Here's multiply. Python's going to call multiply next. Multiply does its thing, does a return, comes back, and now we replace this whole thing with the result of the multiply that we've already done and replace with divide. So let's do that. So now the multiply line is going to take 25. So multiply 25. So weight is 180, or we just do it this way, times 25. Okay, so now we have 4,500. Okay, so now what we've got is this here, right? Let me get the comment. Enter. V is now replaced with 4500. All right, so now we have the next part. Now Python can call subtract. So popping back to the code, Python's here calling subtract. We pop back up here, we see it comes up to subtract right there, runs those two lines, pops back, and then this whole part gets replaced. Popping back to our little thing here, we see that it's going to be height minus 4,500. So that gives me that number, all right? And then my function call, my chain of functions, we would call this, is now this, negative 4426. So that's the final call, and at the very end, that final call, we have what equals adding age plus negative 4426, and then we can print out what is. So let's see if I got it right. Negative 34391. Yeah, there we go. I did it. It's actually pretty difficult to pull that kind of thing off, so I'm glad it worked. Okay, so you can see what Python is doing is whenever it runs into a function call, it calls it. Okay, but if in one of its arguments is another function call, it has to jump into that and so on and so forth. Now here's where your work comes in. If you didn't get that answer, or even if you did, you should do debug statements, debug prints for all of the functions, going in and going out of each function, okay? And you should study how this is being called. And then you should try to write your own formulas. Write the formula algebraically, right? And then translate it into function calls. If you do that, you'll be pretty good at how functions call each other. Okay, that's the end of exercise 21. I'll see you at 22.